All right, let's get started. I'm here to tell you the story, at least part of the story, the clean parts of the diving museum. And probably this is a common question. How did we really do a museum like this? And probably an even more common one is why? Why would anybody ever want to do this? And sometimes we wonder. Now, for you all here tonight, and the congratulations and the cupcakes say it's our 20th anniversary. But when I thought about this, it's really for me a 60-year-old journey because 60 years ago, we were just frankly normal people who went to museums but never thought that we'd actually be doing a museum. So tonight I want to tell you the who the who, hi, why, what, and what was this journey. But I'm going to focus a lot on what happened in those first 40 years, because how do you turn people into museum doers instead of just museum goers? When we started out, we were really just normal people. You know, we met, we fell in love, we got married. We did take our honeymoon here in the Keys, and enjoyed ourselves just like normal people do. And we were kind of normal. We went off to work. Dr. Joe was a surgeon. I was an ER doc. It's kind of normal. He had a day job all the time. We went on vacation, and they were diving vacations, but that's pretty normal as well for a lot of people. And we went to a lot of fun places. And we started diving in the 60s, in the mid 60s. This is one of those grainy cameras but it shows the things that were used in that time. And there we are, no BC, no wetsuit, a really old style mask. So we had mask, tank, snorkel, regulator fins, and that was it. Everything else you kind of made up. And you can see my round mask with lenses that I had my eye doctor glue in with this special glue. We got to the Keys the very first dive. Fortunately, they were on the bottom of the boat in the water, so the eye doctor glue didn't work that well. Fortunately, we had a little repair kit. Joe had some Celastic, some of that stuff we would use to build aquariums. Glued it on, squashed it down. Plastic is not real clear, but you can see around the edges a sort of a gray white look. But if you squeeze it down hard enough, and that mask has the lenses glued on ever since. It's a lot of fun with diving. And it's a little later, you can see Joe has a little more modern looking mask. Our BC is actually that container there by Joe's arm. When you went out with the steel tank, you were kind of heavy. And so we needed that. We used that as flotation. And then during the dive, if we were collecting fish, we would put them in there, small fish and invertebrates. And of course, your light coming back when your tank is empty, and you either stuff rocks into your weight belt or you fill up your BC, in this case, the container, and are a little heavier. So still, it's pretty primitive, but easy to jump in and out. You don't have a lot of gear. We started collecting and keeping aquarium fish, and it's kind of a normal thing for people to do. But we really got into it. We formed an aquarium society in Cleveland, the first saltwater aquarium society. You know, there may be some other chairs. I see an empty maybe there, and I know a few other people are coming, but there's some chairs here so you can sit down, because I'm long-winded and you don't want to stand. Well, our very special interest in keeping saltwater fish was actually spawning fish. So our special interest in diving, you have to have a special interest in order to go back diving. It wasn't treasure hunting, except for living treasure. And our special interest in knowledge and skill was in sex underwater. Not ours, but the fishes. we published that little magazine for 4 years, and actually some of the articles were quoted and are still today on the keeping of some of the saltwater fish. So here we are watching some spawning behavior in the tank when at a hint that we were kind of addicted to hobbies was that during our aquarium days, we had 44 aquariums. There were aquariums in every room of the house. We had one room dedicated to fish. And of course, they were in the laundry room, the bathrooms, the living room, the Dutch. And in the bedroom, we had 200-gallon tanks. So if you wanted to keep more fish, you had to get more tanks, was the way it went. We had so many fish that when Joe wanted to do shark research, we had to go off-site, and he went to the Cleveland Aquarium, and his interest was immunology as a young doctor, and he was transplanting skin on the shark, and sharks were interesting in that they don't seem to get cancer, at least they hadn't found it yet, and he was wondering about the rejection of skin between other sharks. So we had a lot of interest and fun with the Saltwater Fish Club. We kept all these animals that you see in the tanks, some more successfully than others. And we were very successful in spawning. I was the first person to spawn and raise clownfish away from the ocean in the 70s. It was unheard of at that time because you had quite a job to get the food to feed the fish at the right size and to get the food to feed the fish. It was like an orchestra to keep it all going. These are Banggai cardinals. We had a pair in the aquarium here in the museum. They spawned here, and then we raised them at home in my aquarium. And then I gave them to other fish keepers. So we came to the Keys a lot to dive and to collect fish. We would rent a little boat and go out beyond Alligator, off the deep reefs. And we really developed a love for this area. And you can see with Joe there in the 70s, it's sort of a horse collar. There's no wetsuit, no computer, no octopus, still no wetsuit. Just, again, something to protect your skin and give you maybe a hair of warmth. We wore gloves even then. And we took up underwater photography. We had some fun with it. And we went to the Pacific and we're, again, very interested in the spawning animals there. Here he does have an inflatable buoyancy compensator. And we have a depth gauge, one of those wonderful sea view pressure gauges. You might remember those. Yeah. And I had a wind up bottom timer, and you'd wind it up at 10 feet, it would start going off and time around. And it's here on display in the museum. I felt so sad when it finally failed. We were so successful in our research on fish spawning that we actually discovered a kind of spawning behavior that had been unrecognized. And we presented at a coral reef symposium in New Guinea. And the people there couldn't quite believe that a fish could keep up spawning every night as these small angelfish do. So we published in the Bulletin of Marine Science and got a little credibility as saltwater people. When we went to conferences, everybody there was a doctor. My husband was so smart that he could talk to anybody on their topic without them knowing what kind of doctor we were. We never told because we were at a fish symposium. And we, people there that everybody who work for our PhDs have their special interest and special knowledge. Doctors have a very broad range of knowledge. And of course, we had our special knowledge that the other doctors didn't have. So you can do well masquerading no matter what kind of doctor. But then one day we were on our way home from the Keys. The flight was delayed. We had some time. And we heard there was an antique store near the airport. And we decided to visit it. We had plenty of time. It was really just right on the Miami River, right off the airport. And it was called Stone Age Antiques. And then this is a newer sign. It used to be written out on a board in those days. It didn't have a fence around it. We were there on the day they were closed to take these pictures, but you can see they're promoting some of the many things that they have. And one of them you will see is diving helmets. Isn't this a great pointer, by the way? Now you can call it Stone Age antiques, but when you peek in the fence, this is the entry to it. These are old enough maybe to be antiques, but it looks really like a junk store. And in fact, when you went in, inside it looked a little bit like that too. And don't wear white pants to go through the exhibits because you walk through sideways. But it was wonderful. If there was anything you needed, they had it. So you needed an anvil, you went to Stone Age. You needed a shovel, you needed a polar bear, you needed, anything, a monkey, you could get it there. And we found a diving helmet there.
Oh.
And, it was sitting there on a shelf with a bunch of other junk. It was kind of pretty. We had in our house kind of a maritime theme. We thought, oh, that would kind of look neat. It might be a topic for discussion when we had parties. And so we bought this one helmet for the incredible price of $500. We gasped at the price, but we thought, well, okay. So this was the late 60s. Well, as you can see, it duplicated itself rather much. There it is in our tropical wall. And the collecting bug had bitten us when we bought that first helmet. And if you get a disease that's incurable, there's only one thing you can do. The symptoms get too bad and you take something to kind of lessen the symptoms, to palliate them a little. So the only way you can feel a little better is you get one more thing in the collection. And we did. So all of a sudden we got more. And the collection started to grow. So when you have a collection of anything, I don't care what you collect, anything that you look at and learn about is interesting. So we decided to start researching and looking at everything. And we started to do some research of historic diving. And we did enough research that we were able to publish a chapter in the pictorial history of diving. And we did the diving helmet chapter, oddly enough. And the book used to always open up here. And this was put out by the Underwater Medical Society in the 80s. And it was before the internet, and people started to kind of call us from England and Europe and say, there's a bunch of us interested in this diving history stuff. We're trying to start an organization. Would you be interested? So publishing this book kind of led to the Historical Diving Society. It was first in the UK, and then the American group splintered off and made their own society here. And since then, every other country has splintered off. Instead of having one society with one magazine, everybody tries to do their own. But you can see here I am, lifetime member number 7. So we started doing a lot of lecturing about diving history and, of course, doing more research. There was a lot to learn. And we got to be known as that diving helmet couple. So remember, we lived in Ohio. We were doctors. Wherever we went, somehow we, maybe on purpose and maybe we were asked, depending, we brought along something to do with the diving helmet. I mean, it's a good place to draw a raffle ticket from. Here we are on the top left. We're opening the surgery center, the groundbreaking first outpatient surgery center in Ohio that Joe and I and Barb Draves, my friend, did together, and it's still in business today. The first doctor owned and operated. So we were contacted by the BBC, being known as the diving helmet people. They were doing a production about an ambassador to Mexico in the early 30s, and he was interested in the cenotes, and he wanted to dive them. So they sent us some pictures and said, do you have this equipment and can we use it? And of course, we have the equipment by that time. And yes, of course you could use it, but it's going to Mexico. We will accompany it to advise you on its proper use. And so they flew us and the equipment to Mexico. And this actor was portraying the story that the ambassador had loaded the diving gear on mules, walked quite a ways into the woods to do the dive down in to see what was in them. And of course, treasure was in them effectively because they were kind of something to worship. People would throw valuable things in. They would throw a maiden in occasionally who would be sacrificed. And they were trying to do a picture of the jump of the maiden off the cliff. And the director is saying, silencio, silencio, everybody be quiet. He's ready to shoot the film. We're all quiet. I have my little video camera. We're quiet. And the maiden jumps in and he missed the hit. I said, so it was an adventure and a lot of fun. So we started to travel now to learn more and to collect. The picture on the left is, we have a friend who was Italian and we're in an Italian diving museum that's open by appointment. We also started to collect. Another friend in Germany was paring down his collection. We haven't gotten that far yet, but he was paring down his collection. And here's Joe looking at some of the lamps, and some of them, one of them is in the lamp above the entry. Another one is in the exhibit, and Joe is back at the museum here trying to figure out how the light chip light worked. Because remember, it goes up the mast, it has to turn for all night, and it's oil. So he figured out that needs 57 turns, and then the mechanism works for the 12 hours that it takes during the darkness. It's quite rare because it has been converted to electric, but we still have the oil lamp, and the lighthouse people are really excited to visit it. But back at the ranch, the collection is growing a little, and our Italian friend had these examples of the Galeazzi helmets, the Italian armored suits and turrets. And then he was able to locate an armored suit for us. And it's just absolutely stunning in the exhibit of the deep. So we went at wherever we could to find people who made diving helmets. There aren't a lot of them alive anymore. And at the time, there were a few more. But we went out west and met Chuck Griswold, who you see some of his helmets represented in our exhibit about open bottom helmets. We went to other museums. Remember, 60 years ago, we had visited museums, but not particularly diving museums, and there aren't very many, but this is in the center of France. It's all about the French exhibits, and we wanted to see how they put together exhibits. We also went in Germany to a museum that was only about musical instruments. Neither of us have any skill in music, although I did play on the linoleum when I was only 2. But we wanted to see how you would do a single topic. This was only musical instruments. How would you make a whole museum about that? Because let's face it, we made a whole museum about diving helmets, diving equipment. So we wanted to be able to get ideas on how to do that well. Well, whenever Joe saw a new helmet, he wanted just one more, or maybe just 2 more. And we started collecting pictures, information, books, as you see. And this is a World's Fair of 1905, and look how big the Heinke business was at the time to have such a central big exhibit at a World's Fair. And that really got us very interested in more research. We have of course, honky helmets in the museum. So now we have a lot of diving gear and it's all heavy. And we're two simple people. How do you move it? And so part of the challenge was figuring out how to move and transport it. I think Joe was a pyramid builder in a previous life because he loved to figure out levers, pulleys, block and tackle, come alongs, to be able to move things himself. In the case of the helmet the cannon trying to get it into the trailer, we got the tow truck to come down, but they sent the car tow truck. And the car tow truck, when it tried to lift it, it just tilted up. The driver had to go back and get a tow truck to bring it. And he was able to put it on our trailer so that we could bring it to the Keys.
Wow.
And we started restoring them, cleaning them up. And you see his shirt, he was good. And we started tinkering with everything. And we had a lot of fun diving this old year. It was just kind of neat, as Sharky knows, it was kind of neat using it, figuring out how it worked, gaining more knowledge about it, and teaching other people. Here we are in some dive experience in the Great Lakes with a lot of kids around, and everybody wanted to dive the old helmets. And Joe had a lot of fun, particularly with the Miller Dunn. There's a picture in the Miller Dunn literature of the diver in their advertising, taking the helmet off and holding it like this. And the beauty of open bottom helmets is that if you need to go to the surface quickly in an emergency, you take it off, set it down, blow and go, and you're at the surface. You're not counting on somebody to be able to pull you up. So I'm afraid there was more collecting happening. Wherever we went, it seemed like there was a helmet there. In fact, we only went to places where they had done diving. I can't say that I've been to the Antarctica. I haven't been to the pyramids. We kind of stuck with did the city have historic diving? We'll go there. And so we did a lot of collecting and learning about it and tinkering with it again. We got an armored suit from Germany, the Hagenuk armored suit. When we first got it, it was a little rough looking. And Joe had a patient who had been a mechanic on an U-boat in the war, and he was now retired, getting depressed because, sometimes people retire and they feel like their life is over. They're worthless because you are what you do. And so Joe invited him out to our garage and had him strip down the Hagenuk down to the bare metal, and he was going to repaint it white because they all get painted white by multiple people in the military. Every new crew does another coat of white paint on these helmets that are owned by any country's military. And we got it stripped down. It was so beautiful to see the stainless steel arms, the belly band around that was copper. It was so beautiful that we had them paint the steel, not the stainless steel, and we coated it to protect it and leave the copper and the tubing. And it's a unique, one of a kind. In fact, it's so unique. A few years ago, somebody wanted to sell us a Hagenuk suit. And I said, well, send us a picture. And he sent this picture, the one on the right. We kind of knew, well, you probably don't really have that helmet to sell because it's sitting there in our museum. It was that picture, not just that. He didn't come and take its own view. We're still in Ohio, and they had another patient who was a mechanic, and we had the dive chamber, and you can see how it looked on the top view. It was a little rough. It was so rusty that you couldn't get the hatch open. And we spent some time in this man's outdoor workshop restoring it. And it's out there in front of the museum today. we figured we'd need some heads. So we all started to make a few heads, and I went to my hair cutter, my hairdresser, and she volunteered different hair sweepings really from the floor at the end of the day. And we all each made one according to our own interest. And you'll see the one on the far left in the future. And you'll see it again if you go out and look inside the decompression chamber. So clearly by now, we're really addicted. And frankly, we're out of control, as collectors tend to be. And it's starting to dawn on us that we have a few problems now. One, we live in a house, just a normal house. And as the collection grew, the house seemed to get smaller. The picture on the right is our living room. There's no more room for, diving gear. And the picture on the left is the basement. We had added an addition because we knew we needed more space, and we added a big strong room above the garage. We added a chain hoist, and we put a trap door, like a barn trap door in the, so we could move heavy things up and down out of the garage with the chain hoist. And then there were 4 other rooms, all of which became diving collection rooms. So we could expand and keep growing, but we still had the problem of expanding and growing. And so one of the things we realized is unless you knew us and were invited to our house, unless you knew the guy in Germany that had a collection or the guy out west, there wasn't any place to go and see this stuff. And we also realized that this history that we've enjoyed so much studying and learned so much about, this history is going to be lost if somebody doesn't tell the story. And by now we really had accumulated one of the world's largest collection of stuff. Artifacts, good stuff. And we had a problem. We didn't know what would we do with it all. And how can we share it with people that we don't know that need to hear this before the history's lost? So we started to realize that we needed a museum that would take this stuff, at least a sample of it, and tell this story. Now, remember, we still had our real jobs. We shared the time between medicine and working on diving artifacts in the foundry. But Joe was getting quite a name for himself from being innovative in medicine. He was the first to do videoscopic gallbladder surgery in the northeastern United States. And our hospital, our local community hospital, was so grateful that they put this billboard up on the wall, and people came in from all over the country to have this done. So now you had to think out, well, what does it take to do a museum? And one of the most important things is the vision, and it takes research, so you know what you're talking about. And it takes a lot of knowledge. It takes a team, and it's lots of work and lots of money, and we'll get to the rest. So we got the team. My husband really was the genius behind the museum. He was really a genius on anything he did, but he was the visionary. He conceptualized everything here. And I was the implementer. Every good team needs somebody who's a doer. It gets the, let's do this, and I could make it happen. So I was the great woman behind a great man. So we made a booklet to tell about our vision, and we put together some of the stuff that we wanted to show. There's several pages with different exhibits in it, and we would take it around to see if different institutions would be interested in doing even a changing exhibit with this stuff. But our vision was rejected by everybody we approached. You know, the Smithsonian has one crummy little helmet in a corner at the time that we went to see him. Nothing on this very important exploration under the sea. the Science Museum, the Art Museum, even Epcot. We went to Epcot 5 years before they were going to open, and they had a 10-year plan. And the guy, we had a friend who was a big shot in Epcot, and he said, well, we're 5 years in. We've already planned everything. It's set in stone for the next 5 years. And he said, frankly, doctors, nobody cares at Disney if it's real or fake. So they can do a plastic K-pop just as easy as you see in, I don't know, some of the different kingdoms that are represented in Disney. Gee, the Tarpon Springs, that's where all the cradle of the divers from Greece came and settled there in the turn of the last century. Grand Cayman is the diving capital of the world, as nobody was interested in taking any stuff to do an exhibit. So we decided, you know how it is, if you really want something done, you really have to do it yourself. So we moved to the Keys from Ohio. We started moving our stuff to Ohio, and the cannon arrived, and we didn't have the wrecking truck friend, so Joe built something to lift it out of the trailer. Getting it in was a challenge, and it took 3 guys to do what one old man could do, but and so we started making repeated trips to Ohio to get our stuff, first in a little truck and eventually in a big van with a big trailer, and we got a lot of stuff here. So now in 2000, I created a nonprofit. We started fundraising, we started grant writing, and we started getting out to the news, the papers, getting the word out that we're going to open a diving museum. We had a consultant from Ripley's, believe it or not, come and see our stuff in Ohio, see our booklet. He said, this is great stuff. People would be interested in seeing it, but you have to do it in Key West because location is everything. But we live here. We don't live in Key West. And thank goodness we didn't decide to do it there, because we were here, 28 hours a day working on this 8 days a week to get it done. And we'd had to move to Key West because this is 2003. We're not open yet. And finally, we get permission, another challenge, the permission from the village to do a diving museum. We could convert some of the storage units as long as we promised never to convert them back to storage. And we found this great storage building and started to work on the museum. And this is kind of like what it looked like before. You can see it's perfect. It's 11.5 feet above sea level elevation. It's high. It's on the southbound side, so you can grab the people going to Key West before they've spent all their money and are on and it has housing up above and a little store off it. So we displaced some of the tenants, a few of whom maybe were challenges to pay their storage rent, and kept some and started to work seriously on converting this great building into a diving museum. And we were pretty hands-on. This is our first employee, our first director, one of our very first volunteers. And we're hands-on, pulling nails, pounding out of walls. Joe got in his tractor, drove it up from Lower Matacumby. He's on the side of the road. Old Ford tractors go about 10 miles an hour, I suspect, but we drove it inside the building and he just demolished all the partitions of the storage units and continued to work on the demolition. Now, you're not going to see me doing any work, lifting a hand, although I had the blisters too, because I'm behind the camera for everything. So you wouldn't know that I had anything to do with the development, and you'll have to believe me when I tell you. So it was an interesting thing, and you could see it could be an airplane hangar inside. It's so big. So we had to decide, what are we going to do inside? And when they closed it up, we built it to, at the time, 165-mile-an-hour wind. So that's the strength of these the holes that were closed up from the storage units. Now, of course, 165 isn't even enough. And so we planned ahead. We had already had a design on what we were going to do, and we knew we wanted to do a changing exhibit room like you were just in. So we framed it in before we did the walls, and we planned to do the pocket door so it wouldn't get in the way of any exhibits. Our family was so excited about us knowing somebody who really was going to do a museum, I guess, that they put together a clock for us. We took the time to do some off-site promotion. This is the entire staff and volunteers of the diving museum at the time, and we were out at Indian Key promoting the difference in diving over the 100 years that Indian Key celebration was doing. And we got to more advertising. They would come to our house and we would promote things. And it is really, is this art or science? Should these be in an art museum? Look at that patent drawing. I mean, it's just a really neat thing, and we were excited to actually get it. Here it is in the back of our van on its way to the Keys to be part of our exhibit. We wrote a grant to get the museum started, and the Albert and Bernie Einstein Foundation on our dream. No anything on the ground here, no artifacts. Well, one artifact, no, nothing on the ground. They donated $25,000 based on our vision. And Joe, quite frankly, is either bravely or foolishly accepting the real check, not the big dummy that he could have done with the claw of Iron Mike. And it can rotate, it can grasp a big bar of treasure, or it can grasp a little check or a big check. And it was, I can tell you, Joe did some practicing with sheets of paper before that lady came to give us in true, disclosure. Now, nobody's satisfied with poor workmanship, and we weren't either. And we made some mistakes when we designed and built the exhibits. And I can't say it was poor workmanship, it was really poor planning. And when we got Iron Mike and we wanted to bring him into the exhibit, he didn't fit in the door. So you can see him, the guy with the chainsaw making a little difference above the door. We hadn't calculated, I'm afraid, this height here, just hanging there in the car and hanging up in the house in Ohio didn't seem like it was a problem, but you can make mistakes. But it was good workmanship when we cut the hole in the top of the door. The turret, which is also on exhibit there, did fit. Well, we really loved Iron Mike. We have Iron Mike out there on the window beside the doors. We made a little model of Iron Mike. He was a special thing to us. And my mom also made a little doll of Iron Mike, and I think it's back there in the toy exhibit. And he was special. He was, first of all, our only American armored suit at the time, and was said to do quite a lot of things. The special thing about him is he was joined at the waist. And I mean, there were comic books about his exploits. So now, we started with nothing, and everything is a decision, and everything has to be designed from a blank sheet of paper, and we needed a sign out front. So because we were in love and infatuated with Iron Mike, we tried to do some signs with him. But we kind of rejected him because he looks like a robot. Nobody would get it. And so then we did the sign on the right that looks like a typical diving helmet. We didn't really like that because everybody who has any diving business on their business card, they have something that looks like a standard diving helmet. And we didn't want to be standard. We didn't want to be what everybody did. So we actually put Iron Dew on the sign on the road. And that sign was approved, and we were ready to go with it. So this was the front of our building when we first opened. The problem with it was diving museum and shop. store didn't quite fit on the banner. And people came in wanting to buy masks and snorkels with the colors and everything, appropriately thinking we were maybe a dive shop with a little museum attached. And we didn't want to in any way compete with our local dive stores. So before we completely opened, we did change the color of the sign. And then I caved and we put a diver on the sign. Everybody understands that it is a diving museum now. And we also have that really neat little diving museum, a diving mailbox. So it's clear, museum entry, not dive shop entry. And we say, don't drive by, dive in. Now we start again from that blank sheet of paper, but Joe had a vision. So he sat down with an artist and the artist and he drew out the floor plan of the exhibits. And when you see the floor plan, you can kind of see that that's about what happened. There have been some changes over the 20 years, but the basic understanding of it is the same. And of course, you have to, would everything fit? What would fit? You need a scale to make sure you could get everything in, and including things that you have to cut the door frame out. And we had an exhibit map to give to people, and we had it in 10 languages. So now we decided that we're going to paint the walls so that it looks a little better. We wanted to put on old images of old patents because they're so neat. But the village said we couldn't do that because it would look like advertising and we weren't allowed to have that much signage. So we had to get creative and do a sea mural. And we have one little diver that was snuck in here, Art McKee riding his anchor. Oh. Well, we had, wrong. Oh, that was really wrong. Okay. We had two artists that we had gotten to do the work. David Dunleavy worked with the sprayer, and he didn't sketch anything first. He just got the big spray gun, sprayed everything, and developed the murals, which was absolutely amazing. We were very grateful because the community really stood behind us. The paint was donated, the scaffolding was donated, the food was donated. Everything that we really needed to have this mural done was donated by the Ace Hardwares and the Sherwin-Williams and the businesses in the community. And you can see the mural taking place on this wall. And you can see that David is still working with his spray can, and Guy Harvey helped us. And you can see the little brushes the guy wanted to use. So it was very different art styles, but came up with a fun mural. No, shouldn't do that. And to their credit, both artists spent some time with people in the community that came out to see them work. And with kids that would come, David had set up a big board that they could paint too, which was kind of nice. They really gave their time to us and the community. And gee whiz, you can't really count on an artist to paint exactly what his sample was. And somehow Art McKee came out a little bigger than the village had approved. And we show him as he did riding the anchor. And we paid tribute to him because he really was the father of modern treasure diving. And there's no monument to him in the Keys. He was right here for most of his adult all of his treasure diving life. And there's nothing to honor him in our village or anywhere that I know of other than the museum. So we had a mural dedication in February of 2005. And we did a little mini museum inside the museum, a little mini show that, and I wanted to show you something. You see, we're in the store out there. Oh, look, we filled in the hole that we got. that we caused by trying to get Iron Mike in. So it's time to start preparing artifacts for the exhibit. We recruited my mom to start doing some of the work. You get whoever you can. And this is now our opening year is beginning. And the way we did our opening year is once a month we opened an exhibit. So the first month it was breath hold diving. And once a month, Joe and I and any volunteers prepared the exhibit. And we had brought all the stuff from Ohio for that exhibit. And we created a lecture about the exhibit. We gave the lecture out in the store out there. And then after the lecture, we took people back on a tour of the exhibit so far. We opened part-time that year. Part of the time, the mission was free, and you could go as far as the exhibits were gone. And with the Immerse Yourself series that we were doing, the paper took part of that and really gave us some publicity. And so since actually 2005, this time of year, we've done a monthly Immerse Yourself. Even during COVID, we did it remotely. The very first lecture, Ophelia, a hurricane came through, and everybody was asked to evacuate, particularly non-residents. So 6 hardy people came to the very first lecture. But we fulfilled our TDC grant by holding all 12 lectures. And you can see this is where Joe is giving the lecture. I'm the person here bent over the slide projector, and I'm talking about a real slide projector. I worked that was my role here with the Immerse Yourself. And so even here's some of our 10-year Immerse Yourself series. And initially, I did all the advertising too. So 3 people did the work of many, but 3 very dedicated people. When Joe built the museum, he wanted 2 things, and at least doesn't like me to say this, but he wanted fun stops for kids. But he also wanted rest stops for seniors, namely benches and chairs. Don't tell my mom that I'm using this picture of her because she really wasn't a senior. She was one of those volunteers, but at 96, a rest stop was actually pretty grateful. And I'm glad we have them now myself. Here I am at my rest stop podium. And I used this because I couldn't see over the real podium. I couldn't get anything high enough that I could get on. So we've got fun stops for kids. And what he said is, if you can see it, you can touch it. He didn't want to hear a bunch of no-nos. So we made it so that the kids could touch it and use it. And here a bunch of kids are trying to lift the silver bar. How long could they hold their breath? Little kids can hold it about a minute. And if the 5-year-old comes out and says 7, she's lying. Because little boys are so guileless. Little girls sometimes can, sorry. Sneaky in there. Yeah. Museum record is 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Somebody who said he should beat the previous record. No, we had to resuscitate him after. And so kids can play with things. We let them use the pump. We took the hand grip off because Big Brother would hit little sister with the handle. So we had to just let him do it by hand. But you can put on boots and walk. You can sit in it under supervision. You can put your head in a helmet. You can grow up coming to the museum. And this is one of my little nephews who's now all grown up and graduated from college. Now, not everything works. You know, remember Burger King used to give out this cardboard thing that was flat, and you could fold it up and make a little crown. Well, Joe thought it was really neat. And how could we do a diving helmet? So he worked it up with cardboard and tubes, and the design just wasn't a workable thing. So we were smart, but not completely able to do everything. But scavenger hunts did work. They're still popular. And although we have them for non-readers and readers and teens, the parents and big kids like the little kids along, and I think they have as much fun. And everybody likes to come back and see how many of the little divers they can find. We make them for special events like holidays and special times, and they change a lot. They're popular, but it takes a lot of people to do a museum, and almost in every picture, when you see us putting together an exhibit, you'll see a volunteer helping. This was our neighbor from Ohio who came down to volunteer for us. And we have the life-size stained glass, and we put together a door. And now I'd like to take you inside and see that was the first 40 years. Let's see some of the things that got us here today. And remember, everything has to be created from the beginning. You've seen this one before, but we made sketches of everything. And to Joe's credit, he knew what he wanted to show, how he wanted it to look, and even better, he knew that he knew where all of these artifacts were in Ohio. So when we made our trip north, we made 6 that summer of that opening year and got enough stuff for the next 2 exhibits. And we were really on a treadmill to do everything to get these going, particularly because there were only 3 of us plus volunteers doing it. Plus, remember, when we're open part-time, somebody has to work the front. The research was so much fun, though. One of the neatest things we found was the story of Gilgamesh. And this is one of the oldest records ever found of writing, first of all. But it tells a story, kind of a Paul Bunyan kind of story about Gilgamesh. But one of the stories is a diver going down, and we consider it the first dive log. And what does he dive for? The plant of eternal youth. You have to go in and pay attention at the very first exhibit to learn what happened and how come we're all gray. Well, some of us aren't. This was a winter project, a jigsaw puzzle of glass. And we wanted to do a Tartaglia diving bell. And we found this bell from something used by the BBC. We ordered it online. The packer insured it for himself, but he didn't pack it well. He kind of threw it into a cardboard box, no padding, sent it off. UPS brought it. It's a box of glass. So we made the claim. UPS came out. They said, they usually take it if they are going to pay off the sender on the claim. We said, here. And he said, no, you can just throw it in the trash. Well, throwing something away is not a word for a collector. So we spent the winter putting it together. And we got it together. We only were missing one piece. And Joe made a frame for it. You can see the biggest piece is not very big, but it was hard because there weren't a box with a picture on it or anything. You just had to kind of figure out what fit. And the Tartaglia bell is actually, you see the thing from the 1500s, and actually the BBC had done a thing on it, and it did function. And you see it here on display in our early exhibit. The Klingert suit was another one that we found. I love the old diving machines. Klingert's late 1700s vision, we call it Klingert's kettle, appropriately enough. It actually worked. And the artifacts in this exhibit, all 3 are actually kind of antiques in themselves. They were made for a World's Fair in Canada over 100 years ago. And you see the display, or early display. It's been redesigned since then, and it has more stuff in it, but looks a little classier. And the staff has a little sense of humor. If you look up into the barrel, you will see a picture that you may recognize from the previous. They wondered how long it would take me to notice. We wanted a replica of Halley's bell, and so we had the dimensions in one of the books here. Halley writes about it, and he writes about his experience going down in the bell. And a friend of ours, Doug Huff from Museum of the Man in the Sea, was a woodworker, and he made it for us to scale. And it's kind of important. There were bells before Howie, but Howie really improved the bell. And you can crawl in. Of course, when it was really a bell, it didn't have that big gap in the front. But you can go in and see how Howie improved it. The other thing that's really special about Howie is we credit him with the first diving helmet. And it was also described extensively in the royal proceedings, and we made it to scale. A special exhibit to us was the South Florida exhibit because it's so important to the Keys. And so we did a couple iterations of how the exhibit should look. We had the drawing and we put it together. And then we've redesigned it since then to make it a little more upscale. The first go round of the museum was cruder than today's work. Let's just say that. And diving in the Keys actually started with the Miller Dunn one. And when they did their literature, they said it is so simple anyone can use it. Even fine ladies can walk on the seabed. So we challenged that. We had a fine old lady who wanted to walk on the pool bed. And I had put the staff down in some of the diving helmets the year before, and she said, you know, I want to do it next year. And she said, this is not bad for 93, planning ahead. And she said, I want to go down in a helmet as old as I am, and I want to go first. So you can see the expression she had on the helper is maybe questioning her thoughts and decisions about doing that, but he put her down. You can see she still has her glasses on. You don't even get your hair wet. You don't have to swim. And she walked on the seabed. So now we're designing the South Florida mock-ups, the imitators, and we put together a few versions of what it should look like. You can see several iterations. And eventually we settled on the one on the right, which you can see now. Another very important person is the William Beebe exhibit because he used the Style 2, which is our logo helmet. And he went in the Arcturus adventure, that one of the first books that he wrote, he writes about his experience in the South Seas. He was sent there as an ornithologist. He went underwater in the Miller Dunn helmet and came back a marine biologist. We're going to move on to the treasure room and Art McKee. Remember, everything is heavy. You need block and tackles and a strong nephew to help you. And so this is the treasure chest that we were carrying in. We got it from the Smithsonian. It was a discard from them. And it's very nice. It has a lot of our treasure. It's a locking cabinet. And it's in the room dedicated to Art McKee. And we have a room dedicated. He was a great guy. You can see here is a picture of him in the 40s. He's obviously very very self-confident, cocky, literally and figuratively, I might add. And was this a mixed group? And he was showing off on the diving. Well, when we did the mini exhibit, we had the image of him, and there's a person there who might also be a little self-confident and cocky. Yeah, the McKee exhibit. And McKee was important because he's here in the Keys. He did the first museum, and we had a drawing of his diorama collecting treasure. And we based it on a drawing that McKee had in his treasure room. And we, oops, that wasn't good. And the diorama shows a lot of the things that McKee invented. We're going to jump now to the premier exhibit, the Parade of Nations. Every country that made a helmet is represented in the parade, and it's the best creation, in Joe's opinion, from that country, because some of the countries, we have many things that represent it. And Joe's challenge was to figure out how could he display these helmets so they seem to be floating in air. And that was his vision. Clearly, the bleachers weren't going to do it, but in a pinch, we could have done it that way. And he's trying to design something that would allow the pipes to hold their weight because it's 60 pounds each on each for each helmet average. And so we went through several iterations. He tried one, got a welder to build a special clamp to put the helmets in, and that's what we did for the Parade of Nations. It's interesting in the parade, there's a lot of countries represented, and they're only just buckets that you turn underwater to use for diving, but every country had a little different spin on how they should look. And here we are showing off the Parade of Nations. Today you can listen to Joe giving a talk about it. He dictated it just before he died. He never heard it put together. And we can't make any corrections if we move the helmets around. So remember, everything is the decision, and we had to design a logo again from scratch, and we ended up with the one that you see. We decided to make a replica. We don't have it in here anywhere, but we decided we'd do them till we're done too. And years later, this work really paid off because kids love to put their heads in it, and it's pretty durable unless the kids throw it down, which might have happened. And it's lightweight and it's something that we can take to events. So building different exhibits took a lot of thought, effort, accumulation of stuff to get a pretty underwater lamp exhibit. We have the beginnings of the earliest regulator. We discovered that in 1838, a Frenchman, Guillaume, developed a regulator that was very much like the Cousteau regulator 150 years later. Joe thought it looked doable, so he had a craftsman make a sample of it and dove it in our pool. In fairness to Guillaume, because there was no piston pumps at the time, he used only a balloon at the surface to see if he could actually use the regulator, and clearly it worked. He enjoyed trying it, and you can see also that Guillaume developed a buoyancy compensator, which I didn't have for not 150 years, but probably was only the first 20 years of diving there weren't BCs. So we had to make more decisions. We designed a rack card from Strength, a newsletter. We started to do ads. We made our aquarium, and we wanted to make it so you could put your head in or your pet's head in, because we are pet friendly, and see fish swimming around as if you're underwater. We found time to go off into the community and do offsite exhibits. But remember, everything you carry in a diving exhibit is heavy. And now we're going into the abyss, our premier exhibit that has all the diving armor in it. Again, we needed to decide upon an exhibit guide. And here we have a Bobcat board member bringing in the armored suit, the gym suit into the museum. John is multi-talented. He's not just a board member and a commercial diver, but we really appreciate his knowledge of diving and of working in Bobcat for that matter. He had actually driven the thing down all the way from Norfolk, yeah, I was gonna say but it was Norfolk. Brought it all the way down to the museum. We got the Bobcat. Unfortunately, he knew how to use it.
That was an interesting trip as well.
So here's.
Can't wait to hear that story.
Here it is in the museum, and it's a really neat exhibit. When you go in and nobody else is there, the room is dark, and then as you approach the different armored suits, they light up for you to see. So it's kind of fun if you're the first person in. and set off the timers as you walk around. So one of the, again, the Iron Duke, the Iron Mike. And then we started to upgrade the exterior. We put a submarine on it. The village wouldn't let us put it down in the ground. They said, oh no, it would be advertising. Heaven forbid you should advertise for the example.
Yeah.
So what did it take? And I've went through several of the things, but it also took patience and people and time to grow. Here we are, fourth anniversary. That was kind of staff and volunteers at the time. We had a 6-year anniversary. And it does take a lot of people. The original team and a lot of others, a lot of volunteers that we couldn't have worked without. Here's our tall volunteer. By the way, that's our tallest volunteer and our shortest volunteer. He's not standing on a chair and she is not sitting on one. Took a lot of effort and volunteer. Here we were moving the stained glass. We did recruit our moms and had them working in the store. Our local, our artist was here local at the time. He's an artist, exhibit designer and fabricator. So he did all the exhibit upgrades that you see. We had a team, some volunteers, some staff early on, several more from after one of the events. And here we are in an event with a lot of people, many of whom you will see and know, and some of whom you know better. You just can't do a museum without people to help who are willing to give their time and effort to pitch in. And we've had some important visitors. Sylvia Rowe came and visited our armored suit several times, but also this was a bride on her way to get married and she saw the big mural. She was clearly also a diver, you can see from her. And she had to stop and get her picture taken on the way to her wedding. And here we have Joe with 2 aquanauts, Bob Barth and Scott Carpenter. He was more famous for being an astronaut, but he said he valued his work as an aquanaut much more. So we had kids and dads having fun. We had people on the gift shop. Here's again the staff displaying a little sense of their humor, wondering what I would think of. Could they sell me? We have people having fun with diving history. We had pledged to do this library, which we opened in 2012. Here's the library getting started. These 2 young men came to work for us for the summer between college years, and the young man on the right is our board chair today. We're grateful to have him. We're getting the library sketched out and ready. And oh wait, I did do a little work. Here are the books in one of the cabinets installed. But each book before it came, it had to be taken from our library down in Lower Matacumbe and put into a database. That was my rule. And I had a lot of volunteers help do that. Here we are happily putting in the last book. And then I had Patty's mom, one of our board members in her 80s at the time, putting more in. She was quite good at putting books in. This volunteer from Russia also helped us with a lot of the entry of data into the thing. And each book takes about an hour to put in properly. The work is really ongoing as the museum and the artifacts grow. We had a special opening of it, and I'm coaching these 2 volunteers on what to say and do and how to handle the rare books. And so now it's a multi-purpose room. So I hope you come and enjoy diving history at the museum. I hope you have a sense of humor and fun with diving history. And Joe and I thank you for your attention. It's time to come back to the surface. I'll be glad to take questions if you have any. And if I don't have the answers, I'll make it up because I'm supposed to be the answer. Yes, back of the room.
How many helmets?
are in the museum,
How many helmets
are in the museum.
though that you collected?
Oh, yeah. Today, how many helmets I own, however, because that's the most common question, it's the first one, and I own 9. And they're at my house and I enjoy them, and frankly, everything else is pledged to the museum, so I don't really own those. Upon my death, you'll have to wait. And many of the things in here are already, most of the things have already been donated upon my husband's death. But, so how many does the museum have under pledge? I don't really know. But I own 9. It's an evasion question answer, but that's the truth. I really haven't counted them. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Okay. What was your most interesting discovery underneath the surface?
Under the surface diving, as I said, our specialty was sex underwater. And the most spectacular things was being able to see fish spawn, probably where no one else had seen them before, and recognize a kind of behavior of spawning strategy that had not been seen before. Because when people go to look at spawning, they tend to go at the full moon because it's nice to dive there, but they spawn in the dark too. And so wherever we never saw a sunset because we were always in the water and at the sunset. And we'd go in and as the sun was going up, down, and we would come out in darkness because you didn't want to use a light to punch a hole in the darkness. Diving with my nephew, we didn't have lights. He had a big, so you're not going to see anything. So I'm going to punch a hole in the darkness.
So the collection is amazing.
Thank you.
What's the one thing that got away? What do you really regret?
It got away, and maybe it's not as important now as it was then. The John Wayne helmet got away. There was a helmet that John Wayne used in a movie, and they had enlarged the front, the window, because it was John Wayne's face, the talent, as the saying is. And we bought it from this antique store, by the way, Stone Age junk store, or antique store. And we sent him the money, he had the money. And somebody who shall remain nameless walked in and paid him more. And old man Stone was not a man of honor. And he said, I'm sorry, somebody came in and paid more. So that got away. And, you know, it was important then because some of you know who John Wayne was, but you know, your children don't. So maybe the John Wayne helmet isn't quite that precious, and it got away.
Julia's got some questions from our listeners, our viewers.
So one question is the photo of you with the diving bell. Can you tell us the story of that? Like, were you diving in that? Were you invited to do it? Was it your bell?
Oh, okay, and the
Yeah.
big diving bell that I'm beside, yes. We went to Norway to do a presentation about diving bells. It was a whole international conference. And we went and it was November, not a very nice time, by the way, to go to Norway. You never see the sun or the moon the whole time you're there. But we were at a conference, so it didn't matter. And they had the bell that people could go down in if they wished. And we all wished. And so we did. And it was kind of neat because they had a safety diver on the outside using scuba, the bell diver going down. And when I went down, my husband went down in the hard hat year. So we had hundreds of years of history all in the same tank at the same time. This was the Navy's officers' quarters, and we had the conference in their test area. So there was a really deep cold water, it's Norway after all, tank where they trained divers and did research on how the bell, how long could you be in a bell before the CO2 went back or started to go down? How long could 2 people be in the bell? So it was very interesting, and that's how we got to go down in a real, and it was fun. the most amazing thing is there's no sound. And the other amazing thing is when you come back up, all of a sudden the water comes out of the air and its fog is in the bill. It was just really very interesting.
Well, thank you all. Dr. Sally's going to be around for a little bit. If any of you have some additional questions and want to come up, we want to thank you for being here. We always offer our speaker an annual membership. Sally's a lifetime member, so I don't think, but we do have really cool T-shirts that we've given her, and we greatly appreciate her being our senior historian and being part of such an integral part of the museum on a day-to-day basis, 20 years later. So thank you very much.